Today's episode of the Our Hen House podcast is being sponsored by our partner, A Well-Fed World. A Well-Fed World is a hunger relief and animal protection organization chipping away at two of the world's most immense, unnecessary, and unconscionable forms of suffering. The suffering of people hungry from lack of food, and the suffering of animals used and abused for food. Mending our unjust food system is a critical part of solving the world's most destructive and persistent problems. Fortunately, the plant-based foods that promote health and well-being are the same foods that conserve resources to better feed the world, while reducing greenhouse gas emissions and protecting the environment. A well-fed world provides the means for change by empowering individuals, social justice organizations, and political decision-makers to embrace the benefits of plant-based foods and farming. Learn more at awfw.org.
Our hen house is a squawking house. Our hen house is their hen house. Our hen house, ooh, it's a funky fresh house. Our hen house is your hen house.
Greetings, everybody, and welcome to Our Hen House. This is Jasmine Singer.
And this is Marianne Sullivan.
And we are so happy that you're with us today for this week's show. Marianne's guest today is Leah Garces, who, when she interviewed with us a couple of weeks ago, was helming Compassion in World Farming. Well, in those
the American division of Compassion in World Farming, which is a huge international organization.
Yeah, big. But in those 2 short weeks, a lot has changed. And now Leah will be heading up Mercy for Animals.
Pretty crazy. I don't know whether to think that we're totally on top of things or we're completely out of the loop.
Right, because
I had no idea this was going to happen when I interviewed her 2 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm. Right, and last week we had a best of
2 weeks ago.
Last week we had a best of investigations from Our Hen House. Great episode, by the way. I loved the way that was packaged. And the week before that we had Matt Rice, who at the time was the president of Mercy for Animals.
Maybe we should just start a show where we only interview presidents of Mercy for Animals. I guess that would have to mean they would have to turn over rather quickly, or it would be Leah all the time.
Oh, I've got it, Marianne. We could do a best of show of the presidents of Mercy for Animals.
Really could.
It could be Milo, formerly known as Nathan, and then Matt and Leah.
Yes.
Yeah, totally. But I'm so excited that she's going to be stepping in because I also am a huge fan of Matt, just for the record. Like I'm sad to see him go, and I think he's going to go on to do unbelievable things because he is an incredible activist. I was very surprised by this shift, but I also have a great amount of respect for Leah, so let's see what happens.
We love everyone. We love all presidents of Mercy for Animals.
We love all presidents of Mercy for Animals.
We are equal opportunity president lovers.
But not presidents, presidents of Mercy.
Not presidents of anything. No. I won't go into what. Just presidents of Mercy for Animals.
Well, things are getting shaken up out there, and your interview with Leah is fantastic. And if you're not familiar with Leah, I think you're going to very much enjoy getting to know her better.
Yeah, and I think you will. I mean, even though I did not know at the time that she was going to be shifting a job, I think the interview is still fascinating and still gives you a lot of perspective into her mindset and into where she thinks this movement is going.
I got to meet her at the Animal Rights Conference earlier this summer, and I'm really excited about getting to know her better because she is an incredible activist, and so I'm so stoked to hear your interview. What do you have for bonus content this week?
More with Leah, much more intimate, really interesting. I loved her story of when she was a kid. She grew up in Florida, and you could really tell from the story she told that, it was going to be all about animals for her. So I really love it when those stories come to the forefront.
So if you are a member of the flock, you will get an email this Tuesday, the Tuesday after this podcast episode goes up, with a link to our bonus content, or you'll be able to find it on the flock Facebook page. If you're not a member of the flock yet, you can join for $10 a month at ourhenhouse.org/donate. But before we get to Leah, have you been following what's going on with this neighborhood in Toronto that is being dubbed Vegandale?
I saw news stories, and I haven't really... I don't really have any in-depth knowledge, so fill me in.
Well, basically, there's, think of the vegan mini mall in Portland where there's just like a conglomerate of vegan stores all together. But this is going to be a whole lot of vegan stores, and there already are some, and it just opened up, and there's going to be a whole lot more. It
kind of reminds me of that. Remember that song that Justin
Timberlake
did a while ago called "Come On Down to Veganville"?
Yeah, very similar. Very similar. I wonder if Justin
Timberlake
is going to maybe one day be the president of Mercy for Animals, and we can have him on the podcast. Anyway, the businesses that are currently part of Vegandale, which just opened, are the Copenhagen Vegan Bakery Cafe, Vegandale Brewery, and Not Your Mother, and the Imperative, which was already in the area and is reopening as part of Vegandale. Like, they're doing all this press. Vegandale Block Party happened last weekend.
I want to go. I want to go.
I know. Well, there's going to be at least 7. Do you remember, actually, we made a video, I think it was 2011, called A Vegan Taste of Toronto?
Yeah.
And you can find it if you Google it.
There was great vegan stuff in Toronto. We found lots of stuff.
I know.
Big and small.
I fell in love with Toronto. I really loved it. And I'm so excited that this is happening.
I was once told that you should pronounce Toronto. If you were from Canada, you would pronounce it Trana.
Trana?
Yeah.
Really?
I wonder if that's true.
I was living in Santa Cruz, for like a year. Say the name of the city I just said.
Santa Cruz.
Okay, well, you said it right. But for the first several months, I was saying Santa Cruz, and everyone would start laughing and laughing and laughing because I had a hard T on Santa Cruz. I would say Santa Cruz, and they'd be like, ha 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 ha, you're not from here. Anyway,
Americans don't usually put hard T's into anything. I wonder why you did.
This is so not interesting, or I put a G, like a hard G on my last name, Singer.
That is kind of a common
Singer.
Jewish pronunciation.
I could be like, I'm Jasmine Singer.
Yeah.
Jasmine Singer.
I have noticed that people who seem to know what they're talking about or be familiar with Russian pronounce the president of Russia's name Putin and really pronounce the T, Putin. So I try to do that so I sound smart.
Lots
Instead
of president
of
discussions. Mm-hmm. Okay. So
I think I got off on a slight tangent.
A little bit. But Vegandale, which I am going to pronounce Vegandale, it has gotten this hilarious pushback from this group of concerned citizens in the neighborhood in Toronto that it's opening in called Parkdale, where they are fighting back. This story could actually probably fit within your Rising Anxiety segment, but I think
it could fit on The Onion. It's nobody's actually trying to officially change the name of anything to Vegandale, right? They're just calling it that because there's a bunch of vegan things there. Do I have this right?
It has Vegandale branding. To my knowledge, it's
but they haven't gone
unofficial.
To the city of Toronto and said, let's change the name of this neighborhood.
No, not to my knowledge, but but the forums, the group of concerned citizens have a Facebook event page because they were going to fight back, and the Facebook event page lists 2 goals: one, that the Vegandale Block Party that's happening, or it happened, be canceled. It wasn't.
God.
And 2, to permanently remove all Vegandale branding. And now I just want to edit.
Are mildly humorless. And fun-free.
And they say
What's
that
their
about
problem?
us vegan lesbians.
They don't have to go around saying they live in Vegandale, do they? It's like if I called the block I live on, this is Marianneville.
It kind of is. You're the only one who lives on that block.
I think I might start doing, but it doesn't mean anybody else has to call it Marianneville.
Roseville, more like.
Well, that is a much better name, I have to admit.
Rose the Dogville. But it makes me think of Boys Town in Chicago, or I don't know, just these neighborhoods that marginalized communities have gone to and opened, and it's sort of saying, why, I can imagine that the people fighting this, I can just imagine them shaking their hand in the air and saying, why isn't it good enough to just have a vegan option at a restaurant? Why does it have to be a whole neighborhood? Just I can imagine people who would fight something like Boys Town in Chicago say why can't there just be gays allowed in straight bars? Why do they need their own bar? There seems to be a similarity somehow.
Yeah, but I just don't. I mean, maybe it's annoying, and I understand that it's annoying to people because they hate the idea that you should be vegan, and this implies that you should be vegan. And but like you can't stop people from calling their neighborhood what they wanted to call it. I mean, presumably it's a free country. I believe it's becoming a little bit more of a free country than ours, as ours slips in the other direction. So, that is a totally weird story. That's totally rising anxieties. They just, it makes people feel, it reminds people that it's a good thing to be vegan, and they don't want to be reminded that it's a good thing to be vegan because then they might have to be vegan. No. And they don't want to be vegan because, dead animals are so delicious. People are, have you ever noticed that people are really annoying?
I've noticed that. I have, yeah. But I think it's hilarious. So, you brought up something, regarding how people are so inconsistent in the way they think, and which is something that I question in myself all the time, where I'm like questioning if I have these inconsistencies in my own moral baseline. And I think a lot of people listening to that probably ask themselves those questions too. Let's talk about the orca, because we were chatting about that earlier, and it's a good example of
this is on
very
a much
odd
more
cognitive dissonance.
This is a totally opposite story, and everybody's heard the story. I'm not going to go into the story about this poor mother orca who carried her dead baby around for weeks. And it was just heartbreaking. But what was weird about it, I thought, was that everybody noticed that it was heartbreaking. And everybody assumed, or maybe not everybody, but most people assumed that they understood what was going on, at least at some level, that this was grief, that this was it was written about in the Times, it was written about everywhere. And I just thought it was so interesting because people were so willing to project, and I don't know for sure that that's what was going on here. I can't get into the mind of this orca. I mean, that's one of the problems when we think about animals. But people are so willing to do that and allow that to happen, and at least allow that generosity of spirit to look at this and think, what's probably going on here, as long as it doesn't affect their lives in any way whatsoever. I mean, we rip animals away from their mother, as we all know, away from their mothers all the time. These mammals who are a little bit more projectable, we can imagine, we understand what's going on with them, and it's pretty obvious when you rip an animal away from its the mother. When you're talking about cows, they bellow for days. You don't have to do a whole lot of projecting to figure out what's going on. But that seems fine. That seems fine. But it's just so frustrating when you can see that people do have this connection and do have this empathy and really do care, and they can't extend it to more than the animals who they really have nothing to do with, and who it doesn't inconvenience them in any way to care about. Have I mentioned that people are really, really annoying?
Yeah, you have. You have. I was just I'm sitting in my car right now, and I am on my lunch break from Veg News, where I'm the senior editor, and I was just editing a piece that will be in our holiday issue called Playing Chicken. And it is by Mark Hawthorne, who's an incredible activist and will be on our podcast soon, because he has the 10-year anniversary of his book coming out. And his book is, of course, Striking Out the Roots. And it's been 10 years, which is shocking that it is coming out again with much more expanded. So he'll be on soon. But anyway, the deck for the piece is they express happiness, empathy, and self-awareness, and we're slaughtering more than 50 billion of them each year for food. Author Mark Hawthorne explores humanity's complicated relationship with chickens. And, it is, I think, it's added, the fact that this is so fresh on my head, reading about the fact that 50 billion animals, 50 billion chickens are slaughtered annually for meat worldwide. And just the average natural lifespan for chickens should be 10, but the average lifespan for a hen in the egg industry is 1.5 years. Just all of it being fresh in my head, on top of these incredible facts about what these chickens are like. They can perform basic arithmetic. They have the capacity to reason. They can perceive time and anticipate future events. events, having that added layer in the context of this discussion about orcas, it's frustrating. It's very frustrating, but thankfully, people like Leah exist to make sense of it all and figure it out for us as we who care about this cognitive dissonance and about changing the world for animals can go about doing just that.
Yeah, and she will be talking a lot about chickens.
Oh, good. Well, I have to admit, like at the time of this recording, I mean, I haven't heard it yet, so I'm really excited to hear it. So I think we should now hand it over to you and to your interview with Leah Garces, who is now, as we mentioned, the president of Mercy for Animals. But when you recorded this a few weeks ago, was the U.S. executive director at Compassion in World Farming, where she partnered with some of the largest food companies in the world with a mission to really tackle factory farming issues. She serves as the chair of the Global Animal Partnership and is on the advisory board for Encompass and Seattle Food Tech. And, which I'm super excited about, she is the author of the forthcoming book, Grilled, Turning Adversaries to Allies in the Fight to Change the Chicken Industry, which is going to be published in next year, fall of 2019. So I'm sure by then we'll have her back on to discuss that more thoroughly. But for now, here is your interview with Leah Garces. There is such a special podcast dedication today. I'm so moved by this. I know you will be too. Nathan Rolston wants to dedicate this episode to his partner for her birthday. Nathan says, August 14th is Sasha's 40th birthday. What she has overcome and accomplished in 40 years takes most people a lifetime, or many lifetimes. Respected firefighter, national-level rugby player, proud vegan, wonderful wife, caring mother, best friend, sister, auntie, daughter. Those are just a few things that come to mind. I will never forget the first time I met Sasha. It was in an alley. Okay, hens, I know what you're thinking, but it's not like that, I promise. Sasha was training some strongman-type events in an alley behind our mutual friend's house. I was not training that day, but I had heard my friend talk about Sasha, so I made the trip over to his house, alley, in hopes that I would get to meet her. I was fortunate enough to get to meet Sasha that day, and we connected immediately. Here we are, 10 years later, and we have been through so much in that time, both good and challenging. 3 addresses, 2 kids, 2 horses, 2 dogs, and 4 cats. Sasha, you have grown into an amazing, loving, and powerful mother, and our boys love you so much. You are a fierce and intense protector of our family, including the 4-legged furry members, a fierce competitor, and you always stay true to your beliefs. We love you so much, and happy 2nd 20th birthday. Severin, Solvi, Nate, McKinley, Zafira, Benny, Oakley, Ook, Susie, Mary, and Fwed. Wow, that is very sweet. Nathan, you are a good guy. Sasha, you are lucky. I have a feeling you are both lucky because you sound fantastic. Happy birthday, Sasha, and thanks for the Our Hen House dedication.
Welcome to our hen house, Leah.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here.
I'm thrilled to have you here. And I want to start off just talking about some basics about Compassion in World Farming, because even though it's a huge organization, I'm not sure our listeners are as familiar with it as some of the organizations that, started and grew here in the U.S. And until recently, it really hasn't had a huge presence in the U.S. So can you just give us a little background?
Sure. So Compassion in World Farming, our main purpose is to attack factory farming because it causes the largest amount of suffering on the planet. And it's our core mission. We only work on helping farmed animals. And we were started in the 60s in England, actually by a dairy farmer who became very upset with the way the industry was going. And so he stopped farming. He started leafleting. He protested along the sides of Peter Singer, and really began working on the first welfare kind of work within the EU. So But at the same time, he was working on really, really big projects like getting farmed animals recognized as sentient beings within EU law. And so before that, they were kind of in the law just the same as a sack of potatoes. But through his efforts, they were recognized as sentient beings, which then created a whole pathway for moving forward on laws and legislation. And the organization grew and grew and grew. And while it started in England, we now have offices around the world. And in January 2011, I was asked to open up the U.S. office here in Decatur, Georgia, in the heart of chicken industry. And part of that was because we saw that the United States is the biggest producer of chicken in the world. And we really felt there needed to be a much bigger focus on attacking that industry. And so I started that office, and we went from me and a laptop to we're now about 13 people in the United States with a primary focus, again, on attacking factory farming. We do a lot of it through trying to build bridges and work with unconventional partners. And I can talk a little bit more about that, but as an example, a factory farmer who was growing chickens, raising animals for the company Purdue, invited me into his farm, and we filmed and exposed what at the time was being called humanely raised chicken. So that's an example of where we attack factory farming by building bridges with unlikely partners.
Yeah, I definitely want to delve deeper into that because that's a fascinating project. And I really feel like compassionate world farming has in the U.S. kind of filled a niche that nobody was filling. And perhaps that one of the reasons that's possible is because it has always positioned itself as anti-factory farming and not necessarily pro-vegan, and has supported quote unquote humane farming. So how does it position itself vis-a-vis veganism?
So that's really a good question. And so I'm personally vegan. I have 3 kids that I've raised vegan with my husband. So it is, I want to see a vegan world. That's my personal value. Organizationally, we have tried to build the broadest church possible. We're trying to get everybody on the train, towards progress. And that means we have to walk this tightrope where we want to, we recognize that plant-based eating is the best way forward, but we also need to not isolate and turn people off from even listening to us in the first place by seeming too judgmental. And we want to recognize progress where it is being made, because at the end of the day, globally, there's 70 billion land animals that are in farms that are being kept in horrific conditions, and we can't turn a blind eye to that. And so, the example that I often use is that, and this is not my example, Bruce Friedrich actually said it in a talk in a debate he was doing, which is, if you were on death row, let's say, you would want, and you were in horrific conditions, like in your prison, you would want someone to be working both to end death row and to be improving your living conditions at the same time. And that's the kind of thing I think we need to do. When we've got a new campaign called Eat Plants for a Change, because we really feel like it is a necessary progression of the welfare work. And so that's how we see it, as a necessary part of the solution.
Yeah, and if I can be so, I'm an observer from the outside and not that aware of compassionate world farming, but I feel like there's been a certain amount of evolution on this issue as well. But I just want to delve, since you are from an organization that does promote both veganism and quote unquote small, sustainable, humane farms, I'd like to delve into just a few of the issues, since I have you here to talk about it. And I think that one of the problems I have, and a lot of vegans have with this kind of farm, is that they're actually not a sustainable, scalable solution. I mean, that's not the only problem with them, but it just doesn't work. Like, we would just have to have a much bigger planet,
right?
Or else have only rich people eating meat, or it just takes too many resources and too much land to raise animals humanely, quote unquote humanely.
Right.
for the enormous number of people we have on this planet. So you do agree with is that one of the factors entering into this moving towards plant-based?
Yeah, I mean, we had this like aha moment, and it's one I've kind of personally known for a long time, but it took a while, I think, for the organization. We're so in the weeds, kind of working on the improvement side of things. And we were kind of looking at the numbers and saying, okay, so we've done a great job over the last 10 years. We've, through the policies that we've achieved through big players like McDonald's or Subway, we've, been responsible for improving the lives of 1 billion animals. And that's fantastic. In that same time, 10 billion animals have entered factory farming. More, 10 billion more animals have come into the system. And the main reason is because of population growth. So there's going to be 10 billion people on the planet. If all those people want protein and they all want to eat meat, and it's simply a math problem. It's just not possible. So when you talk about sustainable, quote, it's not possible to use the land in that way to feed 10 billion people. So, I think Brian Cateman, who was on your show recently, he said that it was a distraction to focus on the small sustainable kind of family farms. I think that often we put too much concern for that type of farming in terms of like the animal rights or vegan approach, and we really have to look at the wider, bigger problem on the planet and the numbers of animals and where they actually are and how do we help them and how do we reduce the number of animals on the plate so that we do have a sustainable, food system for the future that can feed 10 billion people by 2050, which is a prediction by the FAO and the United Nations.
Yeah, I totally agree. I would push back a little bit in the sense that I don't think it's that we focus on it so much because that's the main area that we have a problem with, but more that too many people see that as a solution, and that's a problem because it's not a solution, and that's a distraction really from actually facing the fact that plants are the answer. People like to delude themselves that we can all have like cute little family farms, and it's amazing how people think that in this modern day, otherwise intelligent people. So people can delude themselves and I think that's where the real problem lies.
I agree. And farmers will tell you that too. So when I talk to, I work with, I live in Georgia, and there's a farm called White Oak Pastures here, Will Harris. And he's very clear. He's like, we will never be mainstream. We are a niche product. That's it. And to try to say that would be able to feed 10 billion people is diluting yourself. And that's why, the plant-based future is in the markets are even now accepting that kind of we're transitioning towards that because it's not feasible. It's just like a simple math problem. There isn't enough arable land. There's going to be too many people. That's not going to work. And it's not also going to work to feed people through factory farming either as your protein source, because that requires so much land. You have all of the land that's being used to grow the soy and the maize that then goes to feed animals, that then goes to feed people. Well, cut out, the animal in the middle, and you just use that land to grow plants to feed people. And that's a much more efficient way to feed the growing population. And, you're right. Those are, really, you have to kind of take a whole cold, hard look at the food system and say, how are we going to get there? What is going to, get us there? And be real about that and put aside all of your kind of maybe beliefs or passions or hopes and say, okay, this could be just a math problem. And this is, a plant-based future is the one that will feed the future.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you mentioned that this small niche farmer says exactly the same thing. I always notice that the people who are actually in the industry and the animal rights advocates, actually, they all kind of agree. They don't agree on the solutions, but they kind of both see what the problem is, whereas the vast majority of people just are, living in a delusion about what's possible and what's not.
Right,
It's really
isn't that
interesting,
funny?
Yeah. So I know that Compassionate World Farming had an important presence in eating animals, as did you yourself, and I know a lot of our listeners and myself had mixed feelings about the film because of its very enthusiasm for small, sustainable, humane, put quotes around all those words, farms. So how did you feel about the final product?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what happened. I mean, I was very involved, but only appear for it very shortly, for a short period of time. But I was, I was very glad that the farmer that I worked with got the prominent position that he did through this, because what he did was phenomenal, and it really created ripples. He is, we can talk a little bit about it, but his name is Craig Watts, and he was a farmer who was a whistleblower. And while on the one hand, the industry was calling this humanely raised chicken, we went in with a camera and he risked everything to show that it's not. And that story was, I think, the beginning of people really waking up to the realities of the way chickens in particular are raised, which is, as you know, 90% of all farmed animals in the United States are raised that way. 90% of all farmed animals are just meat chickens, the chickens that end up, on our plates rather than laying hens. So I was really glad that the profile was there. And I liked the film in general. I think that, like the book, I think the book, I know so many people that were thinking about what they were eating for the first time because of the book. And many people went vegetarian or vegan that I know afterwards. It was a huge influencer. And I think the same thing is going to happen with the movie. And I'll just tell you a story of, I went to see it with some friends in Atlanta when it was screening. And they're all like on the verge. They think they eat less, they're eating less animals. They're thinking about it. And I'm in the film and I see my friend like rapidly texting in the middle of the film. And then afterwards she was like, I am so angry. I can't believe this is what's happening. And this is like a good friend who knows what I do, who I speak to regularly about this. And she said, I'm livid. And she said, look what I wrote my husband. And she showed me the text and she said, we're vegan now. Was her text to her husband, and they have 3 kids. And, I think despite what the end message is of the film, and I think those images are so powerful. People aren't actually paying attention to the message. They're thinking about those awful images. And because Natalie Portman is behind it and it has that prominent, position, people are listening and they're seeing these awful, awful real images of the way farmed animals are treated on factory farms. And it's making them furious. It's making them livid, and it's making them act immediately. And I think that's the power of the film that I support. Despite whatever the end message or the focus is, I think those images, getting them out there, that's the key part of it.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. And sometimes coming directly at people with the message of veganism doesn't work. We all know that.
Right. It's hard.
And I thought it was interesting that even some of the, it's just so weird. Like these people, like Bill Nyman, who are enthusiasts for the quote unquote small, sorry about the constant quotes, but that's I have to do the quotes, the quote unquote humane farms. They just seem deeply torn and miserable about what they're doing.
Right. And I spoke to Jasmine about this when we met at the Animal Rights Conference. And, the thing that I noticed about the film is the people that are doing the kind of small farms that are shown in the film, they're deeply torn about what they're doing. And the filmmaker does a good job of showing that. So like Bill Nyman, he uses the word murdering in the film to refer to what happens to them. He says, we're murdering these animals. And this is a farmer who's, this is how he's describing it. And then, Frank Reese talks about, so he's asked at one point, he says that 2 ladies visited him, and one of the ladies says, which one would you keep? And by the way, that was me asking that question of him and saying, which one would you keep? Which one is your favorite? Which one do you not want to send off to slaughter? And in the film, he repeats his story and then puts his head in his hands and can't answer and wells up. And then the next scene is him, shoving these turkeys into the truck off to slaughter. And I think it's such a good, narrative of, even if you do this type of, when you become intimate with these animals and you get to know them as individuals, for the sentient beings, for the, the characters that they are, I think these farmers, they find it very difficult. It is a very difficult job in that sense, and they're recognizing what they're doing, unlike, someone who's treating them like widgets in a machine. At the much more industrial scale. So I just think that I don't know if everybody's picking that up when they watch the film, but I did, and just seeing, really made me think about these kinds of torn people that are doing this, and how it's presenting the ethical question, like, is this right? No, it's like he calls it murdering. He talks about not being able to decide which one to save, and I think that's very meaningful part of the film.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it really brings to the fore one of the hidden rationales for factory farming that we don't talk about that much, but it does, by allowing people who are doing the actual work to treat these animals so badly, it allows them to not see them as real. The better you treat them, the